When performing a physical assessment, it's best to start with a broad focus to get an overview of what's going on, then zone in on the specific muscles. We always start the physical assessment with a postural assessment. This involves observing the client's posture at rest in the frontal, sagittal, and transverse planes. This is a crucial first step because posture affects everything we do. Ideal alignment facilitates optimal movement. If we can't achieve ideal alignment at rest, it indicates that certain muscles might be tight or weak, which will likely affect our ability to perform certain exercises with correct form. In addition, walking around knock-kneed or with a hunchback is simply not attractive and can detract from one's confidence. Improved posture can therefore lead to improved performance, improved appearance, improved confidence, decreased risk of injury, reduced muscle and joint strain. Typically, we start the postural assessment from the frontal plane, working our way from the feet upwards. As we work our way up the hips, we look for things such as, are the feet supinated or pronated? Are the toes pointing inwards or outwards? Are the knees buckling in? Let's take a quick look at what each of these could be related to. When the knees buckle in, that could indicate a weak VMO or glute medius. If the toes are pointing inwards, that could be related to a tight semitendinosus. If the toes are pointing outwards, that could be related to a tight piriformis or biceps femoris. If the feet are pronated, that could be related to a tight peroneals, and if the feet are supinated, that could be related to tight calves or tibialis posterior. As we then work our way up from the hip to the head, we look out for things such as, is one side of the hip tilting upwards? Is one shoulder higher than the other? Is the head tilting to the left or to the right? Sometimes it's hard to tell visually if one hip or one shoulder is sitting higher than the other. In that case, what you can do when measuring the hip is place both hands on the client's hip bone and see if one hand sits higher than the other. For the shoulders, you can have the client straighten their hands and bring them together in front of them. If one hand is lower than the other, that indicates that the shoulder on that side is lower. Let's take a quick look at what each of these postural deviations could be related to. If the head is tilting to one side, that could indicate tight lateral neck flexors on that side or weak lateral neck flexors on the opposite side. If one shoulder is elevated above the other, that could indicate tight upper traps or levator scap on that side, or it could indicate tight lats on the opposite side. If a high shoulder is coming from the spine rather than the scapula, it could indicate weak obliques or QL on that side, or tight obliques and QL on the opposite side. And if one hip is sitting higher than the other, it's likely that the glute medius on that side is weak. As you can see, some of these postural deviations, such as high shoulder, can be coming from the muscles of the scapula or the spine. That is why further testing will often be required in order to tease that out. If you're working with online clients, you can have them take photos in black swimwear in front of a white background when assessing their posture. Moving to the sagittal plane. Here we have the client stand with their back against the wall, or we place a broomstick behind their back. In either case, the back of their pelvis or the most protruding part of their glute maximus should be in contact with the broomstick or the wall. From here, we measure the distance from the vertical axis to other anatomical landmarks such as the lumbar spine, thoracic spine, neck, and the head. The distance from the vertical axis to each anatomical landmark, which represents ideal posture, is as follows. From the head, 2 centimeters. From the neck, 4 centimeters. From the thoracic spine, 0 centimeters. From the lumbar spine, 3 centimeters. And from the pelvis, 0 centimeters. Let's take a look at some possible weaknesses or tightnesses that may be associated with deviations from these numbers. If the head is sticking forward, it's likely related to weak lower cervical extensors or tight lower cervical flexors. If kyphosis or rounding of the back is present, it's likely related to weak rhomboids or tight pectorals. In the case of lordosis, It may indicate weak abdominals or hamstrings, or tight hip flexors or erector spinae. In the case of flat back, it may indicate weak hip flexors and tight hamstrings or abdominals. Once again, more specific muscle length and muscle strength testing will need to be carried out to confirm the real cause. Moving on to the transverse plane. The most effective way to assess your clients here is to have them stand with their back against the wall and raise their arms directly out in front of them. From here, you can have them bring their hands together and measure the distance in length between their hands. If one hand is sticking out further than the other, it could indicate tight serratus, pec minor or pec major on the side sticking further out, tight external obliques on the side sticking out, or tight internal obliques on the opposite side. It might be possible to tease out if the issue is coming from the spine or from the scapula by having your client perform the same drill lying down. If the discrepancy disappears when they're lying down, that can indicate that the issue was most likely coming from the scapula. Assessing online clients in the transverse plane is a little more complicated. They'll need to get someone to assist them with the process. Ideally, they should have someone with them during the initial call and you can walk them through it. Once you have done the postural assessment, the next step is to perform a functional movement screening assessment.